Begin the current Daf Mesech Kesuvos Daf Nun Vav. Begin 4 lines down to the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues the discussion from the previous Daf and the previous Mishnah regarding the machlokes we had is the Tesefes, the Tnoi Ksuba, if it's going to be collected from the time of the Ksuba itself, which is even from Erison, or is that only going to be from the time of Nisuin, because this day he's adding on more money than the 100 to 200 was only for the endearment of the relationship, which we had a machlekes even in that on the top of this amud regarding is that enough for a kribulei daita, which would be even for engagement, or like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says in the Mishnah, no, you would require it to be that of Nisuin. That's when they get close. That was what the money was written for. That's the daita. And that's how Gemara continues explaining who the halacha is like. Shows corresponds to Kazakh and Cheskel, Tanya, and Bethlehem. Appreciate you joining today's daf, all the way from Alaska. Appreciate everyone who's joining us. It's good, much appreciated. So what we're going to discuss in today's daf are, according to Rabbi Shloimy, we said in the Mishnah, Rus is not entitled to Tesefes Kesuba. Gemara has an interesting question. What happens if it's nichnas l'chuppah b'lei nivla? Let's say she comes to chuppah, but they never had b, or nichnas l'chuppah appears a nida, she becomes a nida. The question is, would she be entitled to the Tesefes Kesuba because they got married, but they were never intimate? That would be the question, is that enough, according to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, to say that that's what he made the Tesefes for? Additionally, we had a machlekes in the Mishnah between Rabbi and Rabbi Huda regarding Kesuvos Daf shtar shel Masayim. Let's say he wrote the right amount to the Besula of 200, but she wrote that I already received 100 out of that 200. The Gemara discusses that machlekes regarding, is that true that each one of them holds their opinions, either Rabbi Meir holding that you cannot, and Rabbi Huda holds that you can do that. Some of the key terms of content today's daf is kalamasna mashakasa b'Torah. Whoever stipulates on regarding what's written in the Torah, it's no batal. You can't say on condition of something that the Torah explicitly says otherwise, and that condition is void. And Chacham also chizuk the very Mesi Mishnah that actually, even though according to biblical law it could be valid, the Chacham actually went more above and beyond to strengthen their opinions more than the biblical halacha. So begin the current daf Nun Vav, 4 lines down the top of the Amud. We had said in the Mishnah that although Meikar did, a ksuba has to have only for the Pesula 200 mana. And Yosef said, you want to add on even 100 mana, you could add on as much as you want to. Now, we had a machlekes in the Mishnah between Tanakama and Elazar and Nazariah regarding the Tanakama held that if she's widowed or divorced, whether from Erison or Nisuin, she could collect everything. And Rabbi Elazar and Nazariah says that no, she could only collect from Erison the basics. But the Tesefes, that was only a manas l'kleinsa, on the condition to marry her, and if he dies during the engagement, she's not going to get that Tesefes. So on that the Gemara continues, Yosef Rav Chanina and the Girsis Kara, who was the one who would recite the Chumash, Kamed Rabbi Yanai, he was sitting in front of Rabbi Yanai, but coming and he said the following halacha, that the Tesefes, the added that he adds on to the Ksuba, is only collected if he dies after that of Nisuin. So on that, Rabbi Yanai said to him, go recite the psukim on the outside. Meaning, he's saying, halacha does not follow him, and actually, like the Tanakama, that you could collect all of the ksuba, even the Tesefes, even from the time of the Erison, that you don't require the Nisuin. And Omer Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi, Mishum Rabbeinu, Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi said the name of our teacher of Rav. Halacha is, again, so we have many different opinions saying halacha is yeah, halacha not. He said halacha is like Rabbi Nazariah, that again is only collectible after the Nisun. He says halacha is like him, and Rav Nachman, that was Rav Nachman name of Shmuel. Rav Nachman the Didei Rav Nachman himself says in halacha does not follow Rabbi Nazariah. Now the Nardoin Mishmei Rav Nachman, the Nardoin's version of Nachman is that halacha Rabbi Nazariah. So their version actually holds that he says it is like Rabbi Nazariah. Now, Rav Nachman himself cursed and he said, whoever judge rules like Elazar and Nazariah, that you could only collect the Tesefes Kesuba only after Nisuin, in this and this should be done. Even so, halacha is like Elazar and Nazariah. Even though Rav Nachman had cursed, we say halacha is like Elazar and Nazariah. And the Gemara concludes about halacha l'maisa, like Rashi says it's the Gemara that's ruling, and this is how they finally concluded the Bnei Yeshiva. The halacha is Kabbalah of Nazariah, that again you could only collect the additional, what the husband added on to the ksuba more than the primary. He wasn't doing it for the Erison because they weren't yet fully consummated relationship. It's only for the Nisuin. Now, regarding this opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who we just said halacha is like him, the Gemara says the following questions. Ravin asks, let's say nechnas l'chuppah. Let's say they come to the chuppah, they get married, but he doesn't have an opportunity to have bia with her. What's the halacha according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. When you're telling me that you're requiring the student because it's only for the chiba, for the endearment that you were going to have in the relationship, it's not enough that for the engagement. Is it chiba's chuppah kind of? Is the endearment of the chuppah that we got married, we took our vows, we have like we're a couple, and therefore that would be enough? Like chiba's bia kind of? Or is it the endearment of the intimacy of becoming one? Is that what he wanted, and only then would she collect the teisefes? The Gemara says, Toshim being a raya, come in here to tell you Rabbi Yosef to the Brisa. Brisa says, Shaloi Kasavla, he didn't write for her this addition, Ela Chibas Laila Rishon, only because of the endearment of the first night. So the Gemara explains. If you're going to say, Chibas Chuppah Koina, then what acquires the Teisefes, the addition that he adds onto the Ksuba, is the endearment of getting married, Haindam Laila Rishon. I can understand why it says it's for the first night. Chuppah is only the first night. Eliyamet chibas bia koina, but if you tell me that's the endearment of having bia, that's what kind of for her the teisefes iksuba. So bia b'layla, you're showing the isa. What being together is only the first night. Become elech lesa. From that point on, it's not. Meaning it's not only the first night, and it doesn't even have to be. It's not necessarily the first night. It could be any other night. So what are you telling me the first night is what's kind of for her that chiba? Obviously, it's the chibas chuppah koina. And therefore, if it nichnas l'chuppah b'lei nivla, it would be enough. She would already get the teisefes. So the Gemara says, no, it's not true because, wait a second. Me'elamai, so what do you tell me? You tell me it's the chuppah, that's kind of, it's that endearment that now, wow, we got married, okay, that's what I wanted, and now you'll get the teisefes, the additional miksuba. What, chuppah b'lei, I could ask you the same question. Chuppah b'lei le'isa, the chuppah is only at nighttime, b'mama lesa, there's no daytime chasna, there's no daytime chuppah. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Well, Tanech, according to your reasoning that you're asking, and you say it can't be that of chuppah because it's saying leila rishon. So what? Be a balaylis? I could ask you back the same question on you. What? Being intimate is only at nighttime, imam lesa, but not during the daytime? It's not true. Amar Rabba says, if you were in a dark room, it's mutter. It's permitted to be intimate during the daytime. So what are you asking me that I'm saying it's chuppah because I'm proving to you it's leila rishon, and B is not only the first night, it's every night. You say, well, how could it be chuppah? Chuppah is at nighttime. There's no daytime chuppahs. What do you mean? I can ask the same question on you. What does that have to do with B? And B is also not only at nighttime, it would be daytime. On that he responds is no, holy kasha, it's not true. That's not difficult on me if I hold that it's bia, because it's telling us the normal way of things. With the bia, but generally bia is done at nighttime. Yeah, it could be done if extenuating circumstance during with a dark room, etc. But at chuppah kasha, the chuppah is difficult. What he's saying, Laila Rishon, it's not only that first night. The chuppah could be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What he's saying, Laila Rishon. So then he answers the same type of answer. I can tell you chuppah namel kasha. No, chuppah is not a difficulty because even the stam chuppah would be a kaima, since the chuppah is ultimately, like we know the famous Gemara that says hakol yoyim lama kala nichnas l'chuppah, right? The chuppah is there as a prelude to get to the main event, to have the bia. So arich ara kamashman, so we're telling you the normal way of thing is to have it at night time. You don't have a chuppah at 11 o'clock in the morning because it's supposed to be at evening time. Because ultimately, so that's not a difficulty on me either. And therefore, he wants to be a raya that it's the chibas chuppah, because or else if it was the bia, it wouldn't be just Laila Rishon, it would be every single night. So that would answer the question of Ravin, nichnas l'chuppah v'lei nivla, would be that, yes, she would get the teisefes because chuppah is enough. But now Boyer Rashi has an added question. He says, in that question, I have another question. Nichnas l'chuppah upir sanida. What would happen if, let's say, they went to the chuppah, and right after the chuppah, he's like putting out his hands, as the Haimish should do, they put out the hand, they dance back all the hands, she pulls her hand away. And he says, what's going on over here? She says, I didn't become a litvish, it's just what happened, I became a nida. And so he separates from her, and then he dies. Has a heart attack, and he's dancing back, Chas Hashem. What's the halacha? Would she get the teisefes? He wrote in the ksuba there, when they read in the ksuba, everyone's like a gap. He wrote out $1 million to her because he was so excited to get married to her. And now the question is, does she get just the 200 for Basula, or does she get the whole teisefes of the ksuba? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. Intim Slam, if you're going to say that, as we just said, chibas chuppah koina, the endearment of the chuppah is enough. He's so excited that we got married, that's going to be the kinyan. But what type of chibas chuppah? What's the question? The Gemara explain. Is a chuppah the chazi labiyah? Is it only a marriage that's fit to have biyah? Of a chuppah the chazi labiyah, but a chuppah that's not fit for biyah because she's a nida, then that wouldn't be enough of an excitement for him. That was not what I had in mind. Getting married was only because I know that this is going to take us to being intimate. But if it's not, then maybe no difference. No, it's still getting married. And even though we can't be because you're a nida, it wouldn't make a difference. Take a let us say it's not clear what the halacha would be, even if you're going to say chubas, the chibas chuppah is kaina. Question is if it's a piercing nida that it's not chazi labiyah, would that be enough to give her the tesefes, or would that not? Now we said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Huda Omer, another machlekes that we had, he said, Ratza, if the woman wants to, what he could do is like this. He said that, okay, you have to give 200 for Besula, but he could write a regular ksuba of 200, and she could write, Mana, I already received 100. So essentially, really, they're doing only 100, telling her Mana, 100, but she writes, I already received 50. Rabbi Meir says no. If you do anything less than 200 for the Besula, 100 for the Mana, it's a Bilaz Znos. So now the Gemara asks, on these two opinions of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, does Rabbi Yehuda really write the Chayser and Shaver, that you write a receipt? Because that's what he's telling you. The option he's saying is that, okay, let's say you want to give the Besula only 100, not 200. So good, write her for 200, and she'll write you a receipt. I already received 100, and I only going to owe 100. Is that really true that Rabbi Yehuda holds that you write receipts? But it's not the Mishnah Baba Basra. Mishnah Baba Basra says, a classic halacha, Misha Pada Mixas Chayvay. Someone had a debt. He owed $1,000. He paid up part of the debt. What do you do now? Because you can't have the old document of owing $1,000. Already paid up 500. So what's the halacha? Shabbat says Yachlef. What you do is that you switch the document. You write another document for the amount that's remaining, and you tear up the original document, and you don't write a receipt, which would make it worse for the borrower. Because what would happen would be is that the borrower would have to protect that receipt that he got from the lender, that you paid me 500 from the mice. Which, if he loses that receipt, then we have the same old document. You owe $1,000. He wouldn't have to prove it. So Rabbi Yehuda says no. You swap it. You make a new document. Rabbi Yisrael says no. What you do is you write a receipt for the borrower, and you don't swap to make it worse for the lender. Because why do you make it worse for the lender? Because if you're writing a new document, he loses the lien from the original time of the loan. Now, 6 months later, pay half the loan. You're gonna write a new document. It's gonna be from today's date. So he's gonna lose that old shibudim. So you don't do that. You just write a receipt. So we see Yehuda holds that you don't write receipts. What are you telling me that he should write the ksuba for 200 and she writes a receipt I received? I feel Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of writing receipts. So Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's not difficult because we're talking about the receipt was written in the ksuba itself. That's who you write the receipt. She says in front of us, I received half. Because why did Rabbi Yehuda say that we don't write receipts? Is because we don't want the borrower to have to protect from the mice, because if it gets eaten up by the mice, then this person could go ahead and collect the entire document. Here there's no such of a concern, because she's producing the ksuba, and in the ksuba itself it has the receipt. So there's no concern for the help of the husband, for the help of the lender, for the borrower, whoever that is that would have the receipt. Here it's inside the documents, there's no such a concern. Abaye says no, you don't have to say such an answer. He says, even if you're going to say, even if the receipt is not in the ksuba itself, that this receipt of the husband is such a situation, Yehuda was not concerned for mice like we have by a regular borrower. Why? Because Bishlam Hassan, we understand over there by a loan, we know, Fadle Pare. What happened was the borrower definitely paid up, and therefore it would concern Dilma Mirkas Tavarta. He might lose the receipt, umapikli l'shtana, then the lender's going to take out the document, but the guy is in nachrita, and then he's going to go ahead and collect him another time. So therefore it's not right to write a receipt and then the borrower is going to lose the receipt and then the lender's going to collect the whole amount. It's very unfair. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't write receipts, we write over a new document. But hacha, vaday, it's a terminology of a tamiyah. What, you think that he gave her anything? These are just words that she's telling him that, like, oh, you paid me up. He didn't pay up anything. So inatre, if he protects the receipt, okay, natre, he protects it. Eloi natre, if he doesn't protect it, he's causing a loss to himself, meaning we have no reasons to be invested in protecting him. He didn't do anything for her. She's being Michael. We don't do mechil, okay, so she's writing a receipt. If you lose a receipt, okay, it's your loss. But by regular borrowing that we want to try to protect, the borrower who's going to be collected on the second time, then we don't write receipts. But over here, it says Abai, we have no problem about him losing the receipt. So tough luck on you. You didn't really deserve to get over $100 on your ksuba. Anyway, so therefore we're not concerned for writing a receipt.
Why are we more worried about the load than the amount? So why are we more worried for the labor to lose the shibud?
Right. Well, the truth is, right, because his loss is a very different type of loss. His loss is just on shibudim. The borrower is going to lose is going to be collected on his half his dedicated. I'm saying the lender has to have a document anyway. It's just the question is an older document or a newer document. So I say, okay, yeah, you write a newer document, so he's going to lose that shibudim. But if you do the receipt option, then if he loses the receipt, you're going to collect the debt all over again. So that's there is a concept, and that's that man the who says, like you're saying, that's the machlekes, that the Gemara says, no, I don't care, and you got to protect your receipt. It's your fault. Now the Gemara says that we had two interpretations how to understand Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, because there seemed to be a contradiction with Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah Bava Basra with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah seems to indicate that you write a receipt, and the Mishnah Bava Basra seems to indicate that you don't write a receipt. So we had two different approaches: either that the receipt is in the ksuba itself, or that no, the cases are different. So the Gemara asks on each one of those answers. Meaning, Bishlam Abai Lamak Rabbi Yirmiyah, we understand why Abai did not answer like Rabbi Yirmiyah, that to answer that the receipt is in the ksuba itself, because like Kitani Shabbat B'Techa. No one said those words that the receipt is inside the ksuba itself. He says she writes a receipt. So it's like a deichik to try to say such an answer, so he preferred to say his answer. El Yirmiyah might tell him like Abaya. Why did Yirmiyah say like Abaya? That seems to be a very good answer. That when the borrower pays off, we have to protect him. But here, the husband that got a receipt from the wife, yeah, we could write a receipt, because if you lose it, it's your fault. Your enemies didn't deserve to get 100 off. So why didn't he answer like Abaya? Says the Gemara, because Gezer, he felt it's a decree. Shoyba the Hacha, yes. Although here it makes sense to write a receipt, but up to Shoyba the Alma, then we might come to write receipts in general. And writing receipts in general we don't want to do, because we have to protect the borrower. If we're going to write a receipt to the borrower and he's going to lose that receipt, guess what? You paid up $500,000, you had a receipt, and the mice ate it up. I'm sorry, I'm going to collect a full $1 million again on you. That's something we want to protect. And then we write over a whole new, we rip up the old document and we write a new one. So that concludes the contradiction. But now the Gemara explains the actual halachic opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah itself. So what was the words of Rabbi Yehuda? It says, okay, if she wants to, she writes to him, Hiskabal Menuchamon. Says the Gemara, time it sounds like the reason is the kosvele, that was the words. She writes to him, which we're calling the shayva, this receipt, I received from you a mana. So it's the kosvele of all peh, but if let's say it was just oral, it was just a general condition in the ksuba, then it wouldn't be a valid condition, because this would be what's called masta mashakasa batayra. It'd be stipulating against what the Torah says, because the Torah says the basul has to be 200, and they're making up only 100. If she writes a receipt, okay, it's 200, but I'm writing a receipt back to you. But if they stipulated, they orally said, yeah, good, it could be 100, then Rabbi Yehuda would agree it wouldn't work. Ask the Gemara, why would Rabbi Yehuda hold she has to write it and it's not enough to make an actual stipulation? But why is it any different? Because this is Dava Sheba Mammon, this was called a monetary halacha. It's related to how much money a husband owes a wife. And B'Shamin Rabbi Yehuda, we know Rabbi Yehuda, who we're discussing, the Amar that he says Dava Sheba Mammon when it comes to monetary law, to No'i Kayim, it is a valid stipulation, even if we go against the Torah. The time I learned the Brisa. If someone says to a woman, I didn't make a sleep. I want you to be engaged to me. I'm manas on condition that you don't have on me the three things the Torah says that a man cannot make less for a wife. Although it says in the context of the Alma Avriya, but that's when you take her as a wife. If there's three things, lo yigodea, you can't do less. Our she'er, which is clothing, which is food. Ksus is clothing, ba'ina, and intimacy. And let's say he says, I'm only going to get married in the condition that you don't have these rights on me. So the first opinion says, yes, she's engaged, but if it's not a bottle, your conditions are void, and you have to do all these three things. That's the Remeir. Because you're doing a stipulation against what the Torah says. Yudami says, regarding monetary elements, like Rashi explains, for the clothing and for the food, conjugal rights is not a monetary thing, so that you can be obligated. But regarding somebody that's monetary, Shnoi Kaim. It's a valid stipulation. So if that's the case, so why does he say that here the couple can't just make up? She has to write. Why not? It's a monetary element. Monetary element, you can go against the Torah. So why do you have to say that she has to write it? So the Gemara, Kesuvos Daf holds an interesting answer the Gemara gives. That Ksuba dirabana, that actually the Ksuba is rabbinic, and Chacham also physically devrayim, Chacham actually went and strengthened their opinions more than biblical law. So you write a law according to biblical law, you actually could make a Tanai on Davar Shabbat, but for rabbinic law, they strengthened it so much that you actually cannot stipulate against it, and therefore it has to write, and they can't just make a Tanai B'Kor. That would be a Tanai B'Kor. Now, the Gemara asks on this principle that we just said, is that really true? The Chum, they made their monetary law more stringent than biblical law, and you cannot be masna on the rabbinic law, but Hari Paris. There's a halacha that regarding the produce or the utility of Nichse Melug, which is the woman, she comes into the marital relationship with Nichse Tzarbaza, which the husband has all the rights on it, and you have Nichse Melug, which the wife keeps the ownership, but the husband gets to use it. Now, that halacha, that the husband eats it, is a takana dirabban. It's a rabbinic institution. And yet, yet we find that the rabbis did not make such a strengthening that it should be a void condition if you make a condition to be moichel on the husband's right to eat. You just told me, no, you can't be master. This is what the rabbis say. It has to be like this. You can't be moichel on it. That's what you tell me the wife. She can't be moichel the 100 out of the 200. Because also, chizik the rem yesim mishal Torah. But I'm going to quote you halacha right now, another rabbinic law of monetary rights, that you could be moichel. Not like the principle he's saying, that we learned in the Mishnah later on the Pegimah Medal. He says, if let's say he writes to his wife, he says, look, dinu dvarim, which means any litigation, any rights, I don't have in your nechasim and in their payers. So says Rabbi Yehuda, he's still going to eat the payers of the payers. Meaning he won't have the nechasim and the payers, but let's say they'll sell the payers and they'll buy property with that, so that should be a principle, and then he'll eat the payers of the payers. So the payers he won't eat, but he'll have the payers of the payers. Until he writes down the following words. Din l'dvarim, litigation and words, ainly I don't have the nechsayich in your assets, and then the produce, and the produce of the produce ad oilam, until forever. Then he's locking himself out of having any rights on his wife. But says the Gemara, the Gemara tells us in HaKosim over there, on the Pegim Amid Aleph, my Kosim, what does it mean that he's writing to her that I don't have this din advarim? The Gemara will explain over there, it means oimer, that he says it. He doesn't have to actually write it. Wait a second. We see that his stipulation of saying I don't have the rabbinic rights of peiros is going to be effective. Didn't you just tell me to answer that the Chum made a chizik l'devrayim yisim mishal Torah? You tell me in the Mishnah, the words of Yido are that she writes to him that, you paid me 100. What do you write? What do you have to write? Why can't you just orally say this? Let's make a condition. You'll give me 100 instead of 200. It's Davar Shabbat Mammon. Davar Shabbat Mammon, you can be master mashkar with that. No, it's rabbinic. Rabbinic, they made chizik yisim mishal Torah. Made chizik mishal Torah, they say that you can't be moichel, you can't go against the rabbinic law. But what do you mean? You have halacha, we have the Baal Zeichel Paris, rabbinic law, and you tell me that he could be moichel. He could say it, not even Kaisiv, only didn't done. So how do you resolve that answer? Could you be moichel on rabbinic law of monetary element, or can you not? Some Abaye, he says an answer that says yes. It depends for what. L'chol yesh kesuba. Every person, every woman has a kesuba. V'loy l'chol yesh peres. Not every husband has peres. Milsa de shchicha, because not every woman has nixim alone. So milsa de shchicha is something that was common, which is a kesuba that every woman has of the Yibur on the chizik. There the rabbis made a chizik. Milsa de loy shchicha, something that's not common, like peres. Love their ban chizik, rabban does not make chizik. So he goes through the question, meaning it's a valid question. And he doesn't have to make another answer, but he says there's a chilik in those two cases. If it's something that's common, then they're going to make this that you can't go against rabbinic law. So I'm common. Then, we know goes about Rabbanan, and therefore, no, he could be meichel on the paydas. So it's not a contradiction for the answer that we said why in our Mishnah has to be kaisiv law, not just oima law. The umrallah that she says it's not enough to say because you can't make a tonight on the davar that shchiach of rabbinic law regarding monetary elements. But the Gemara has another question on this. It says, really? Hari chamarim, you have the halacha of the donkey drivers. In the context of the halacha of demai, which we spoke about yesterday, which is a rabbinic halacha, demai, what is this? We don't know when you buy from Amma Oretz, did he take off mice or not, which is a rabbinic law that if you treat it as tevel, the shchichi, which this is common, and the rabbis did not make a chizuk to be concerned that they're doing favors for each other, kickbacks, according to Rabbi Yehuda. What is this? It's not like when the Mishnah says demai. You have these donkey drivers, which they would be the common of, let's say, we always have the prime trucks coming. So these were the donkey drivers. They would come into the city and they would bring the produce, and that's how people would buy. Now one of the donkey drivers said, Shali Chadash, my stuff are new, and my friend, he has the old stuff, meaning, usually new is better, but by grain, by certain things, the old is better because it's dried out already. So he says, my friend, he has the better quality, mine's not so dry so much. Or he says, Shali Ein Masukin, mine was not typed yet, but Shali Ein Masukin, my friend, he's very dati, he's charedi, he's very religious, his is tight. So says the Mishnah, Einaman. The Tanna Kama says, they're not believed in this halacha of Demai, which is there's a chiddush over here. And even though he's praising his friend's produce in other elements, he's not believed on the element of Demai. Why not? Because we're concerned for what's called Goimlin. Goimlin is favors. When we come to this town, I'll make it like, go to him, he's religious. I'm not so religious. The other town you'll say it about me. And then the guy will say, so he must be a religious guy because he's even agreeing his own stuff is not good. And they're going to do it for each other. In other towns, we're concerned for these, we don't believe them. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, he disagrees and he says, Nemanim, they're believed. Wait a second. This is a halacha d'Rabbanan, where it's a milsa v'shchicha, and the Rabbanan are not being geyser, and they're believing these chamarim, these donkey drivers, and they didn't make a chizik l'divreim yisib mishal Torah. Why not? Why are we believing this donkey driver? We shouldn't believe him because we should make a chizik l'divreim. So Abai, he makes another chilik. He says, no, it's still different. Vaday did divreihem. When it's a definite rabbinic halacha, like a ksuba of a woman. So the rabbis made a strengthening for the halacha, and they were very strict and very stringent, and said that you cannot be masna mashal kasva Torah regarding being meichel d'ksuba. But Safek did divreim, a doubt of their rabbinic law, which is what demai is. It's only a doubt. They did not make a chizik for this, and they did not require to go above and beyond biblical law, and not to believe them to be so stringent, because it's a Safek did divreim. There's two types of rabbinics. There's a vadei and there's a Safek. The rabbis were strict regarding the Safek, but it's ultimately only a Safek. But by a definite Rabbanan, which is to have the Ksubah being 200, that is something that we would machmer, not by the Safek. A different approach, Rav Amei says, but Demahi Kilu. He says, no, the question you're asking from that Mishnah is different fundamentally, because Demai is more lenient than all other even rabbinic doubts, because it's not even really a Safek, because really, halachically, most Amaratzim take off Maisim. It was only a concern for the minority of people that they made the takon of Demai, and therefore since it's not really even a Safek, it's really a minority, therefore over there we were not being asu chizik l'divrayim, Yisrael Mishal Torah, and they said we could believe these donkey drivers when he says that the other one is kosher and his is not, and therefore it's not difficult on the halacha that we said. For our Mishnah, Yehuda says that she has to write to him that I received 100. Why have to write? Why can't you stipulate? No, because although in monetary law you could be masna, you could stipulate against what the Torah says, not by rabbinic law, at least like we said, the vadai, the devrayim, which is something that's a milsa d'shchicha. That's where the Rabbanan were geyser more than that of biblical law, and you cannot stipulate against that, and you have to go with 200, but you could write back that I received 100 out of the 200. Now that was all the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now Rabbi Meir, he said, he says, no, anyone that does anything less for a basula than 200, and among 100, it's going to be a biyah of znus, which essentially he's saying that you cannot go ahead, not even like Rabbi Yehuda's option of doing less than that, of writing that I received. No, you can't do less than 200. Now the Gemara makes the following diuk, the inference from the words of Rabbi Meir, that from the fact that the Tana did not say any basula that doesn't have 200, or any word that does not have 100, it's a bia of znus, obviously what he's coming to tell us is like this. Kol ha'poiches, whoever diminishes afil b'tana, meaning, even, interesting idea, even if she's going to collect at the end, the 200 or the 100, because we know his condition is not valid. Even so, since initially he had made such a stipulation, he's just poiches, even though she's going to get, it's called a bias nus. Why? Because from the moment that they're being intimate, she's not reliant on the ksuba, because he said, "Oh, honey, I'm giving you only 100." So even if technically at the end she's going to get the 200 because it's not his bottle, so it says the Gemara, Al Muksav, we see Rameir holds, Tnai bottle, yeah, the condition is void, the Isla, and she's going to get the 200, because as Rashi says, without that, obviously it wouldn't be a chiddush to say the terminology of kol ha'peiches. But the kiven de amala, but since he told her, less lechel money, only getting 100, she's not reliant anymore. And that makes the bias nus, even though she's getting it, because she doesn't know she's getting it. She's not confident, and she's like, "What am I? I'm like a zayn. I'm like, we're not married. We're not. You're not giving me the ksuba." She wasn't confident. That lack of confidence makes it into like a bias of his nus. But says the Gemara asks a similar questioning that it asked on Rabbi Huda. But Shemin Remeir, we quoted this on Amen Aleph. That Remeir said, "The Amar Kol Masna Masha Kol Torah." Whoever stipulates against what the Torah says, Tnai Batal, the condition is void, meaning, and she's going to get the full ksuba. Problem is, that's biblical law. However, the rabbinic law, which is what the ksuba is, it's Tnai Kain. The condition would be valid. So why are you saying that even though she's going to get the 200, but it's going to be like a bias nus because she's not confident? But I thought we're on rabbinic law, but you actually could stipulate against that. So Gemara says, yeah, but may hold ksuba deraisa, which places elsewhere in many places discusses exactly what do we mean when we say, but in the simple understanding holds that the ksuba is a biblical halacha, and therefore you cannot be masna on that. Therefore, again, she's going to get by hook or by crook the 200 zuz, but it's still going to be considered as a bias nus if he tells her that I'm not going to, because she's not reliant. Now, relating to this idea, this opinion, Tanimon Brisa, Meir says, we quote the same machlekes, he says, Kalam peiches l'bsula mimisayim, whoever diminishes for a bsula less than 200, a man or a widow from 100, it is a bias nus, like we quote in the Mishnah, that's considered a bias of out of wedlock. Basically, he says, Rishai, he says, no, he's allowed to. Even orally, it's going to be a valid condition. Rabbi Huda, he says, as we quoted him in the Mishnah, he says, Ratza, if she wants to, Kaisav L'Besula Shtar Shemasayim, he could write to her a document of 200. The Kesuvos Daf, and that's as specific as we mentioned Amen Aleph, and as we're stressing over here in contrast to Rabbi Yasi, Kesuvos Daf, she could write to him, I already received 100, and no, for the widow you have to write 100, but because she could write to him, I received from you already 50, meaning, as Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda also holds like Rabbi Yasi that you're permitted to diminish the ksuba, but if it was done orally, then the condition is going to be void, like we said before, because Chacham made chizik l'divrei more than biblical law. But if she's coming to be Michael, she has to write a receipt. Rabbi Yasi says no, even orally, they can make up. Yeah, we'll give 100 instead of 200. Now says the Gemara, but so Rabbi Yasi, Rabbi Yasi really hold that they're allowed to make a condition to say, okay, we won't give 200, we'll give 100? But in a minute, it seems to be contradicted in the following brisa. Brisa says, you cannot designate a car, you cannot designate a snowplow, you cannot designate a movable item for a ksuba. Why? Because of the rectification of the world. Why? What's the tikkun olam over here? Because it might get lost, its value might go down, and therefore that's inappropriate. That's where she's going to collect her ksuba from. On that one, Bisi disagrees. Says, what? Primat tikkun olam yesh bezu. What type of a tikkun olam is there over here that the Tanakhama is talking about? But v'haloi, but in Ketsuvin, there's no set price. Things go up and things go down, and therefore upeichesim, and therefore sometimes it's going to go down more than what it was evaluated at, and therefore says Rabbi Yasi That's why you can't collect from metal. So the Gemara asks, wait a second, Tanakama Nami in this Tanakama. What do you mean? Tanakama also says you cannot make metalin as a designated place to collect the ksuba from, and the value going down is also including tikkun olam. Meaning, the Tanakama says you can't designate metalin for the woman because of tikkun olam. The DC says, what? That's tikkun olam. What do you mean? There's a problem that it doesn't have a set price and it goes down. That's the problem. So what do you mean? That's also including the tikkun olam of the Tanakama, that you shouldn't do it because of that concern. So in love, brother says, obviously this word's missing over there. We have to read in over here. The Tanakama is saying like this. But remember when we say that you cannot designate metal, you cannot make the Ferrari as the metal for the woman is b'shlei kibbul b'chrayas. It's only if the husband did not accept responsibility of insurance if it gets lost. That is what we're concerned about. It's not right to make a ksuba for a woman designated on some movable item that it might not be here today, gone tomorrow. Property is always here. Real estate is always here. But that's not appropriate. But that's what Tana explained. But let's say he accepts insurance. Oh, listen. Then you can make a car because no problem. There's insurance on that. Now, that means to say that Tanakama is not concerned for the fact that it goes down in price. He's only concerned about if a mishap is going to happen and that car is going to be demolished or get stolen or whatever this and that. Insurance, no problem. We have no concern for that. And that is what the Asr B'Yisrael Labor basically coming to say, no. Ki Kibbul B'Chrayis, you Tanakama. You're saying that's Tikkun Olam, that if he accepts insurance? Amai Oisin, why could you still do that? What type of Tikkun Olam is there? If you're taking insurance on the ksuba that you were Yachid Metala for, why would that work? But even when it's around, even if it doesn't get lost, even if it does not get smashed, even if it does not get stolen, ain't Kitsuba, but there's no set price for items. And the price could go down. And therefore even though her ksuba, let's say, was designated for $10,000, and they got her a car that's worth $10,000, Nissan Sentra, $10,000, right? That might go down to $5,000, so no one's using gas cars anymore, right? It's not appropriate to designate for ksuba a movable item. In contrast to real estate, that's always there. It has nothing to do with the actual value. It's always going to be there. In contrast to a movable item, it's only its utility, it's its value. So that's obviously what the machlekes was. Also, the Gemara concludes the question. So hashdef now, umahasam, if you find over there in that brisa that the dilma paxi, there's a concern that maybe the value of that car is going to go down, and the value of her ksuba is going to be a loss. Chayish Rabbi Yisrael was concerned, says no, you can't make metalton as designated for ksuba because it might go down in value. So over here in our case of our Mishnah in this brisa, the vadikapachasa. It's not maybe. It is going down. She's saying you only have to pay me half of the ksuba. Like Koshkin, isn't it all the more so that they're not allowed to do that? If maybe it's going to go down, Rabbi Yisrael doesn't let it. So for sure going down, he's for sure not going to let it. So he went, no, how can you compare? Hasam over there in the halacha of the brisa, layada. She doesn't know that it's going down, the tocha, that she should be pardoning, that the husband, she thinks she's getting $50,000 with this car. Turns out it's only worth $37 now. So she doesn't know about it to be Michael. That's where Rabbi is concerned. Over here, Yada, she knows. He's making up, but I say you want to get married. I'm writing ksuba for you for only 100, not 200. Become Machala, and she's Michael. Rabbi holds that she could go ahead and be Michael. He doesn't have this problem about Masma Mashakatz, and therefore it's different cases. He's concerned for when she doesn't know that she's going to get less. But when she does know she's Michael, he has no problem with her being Michael. Thank you to anything.